Well, what's his name? It used to be-
All right, more folks
Used to
will
be on
roll in,
60
so
minutes.
y'all just pull up a chair. The nose is probably the most neglected thing on the face, all right, because the eyes take so much of our time and the mouth drives us crazy. And so the nose, we usually just stick a couple of holes there and we're good to go. Honestly, yes, honestly, that's what we do. So I want to tell you that the nose is vitally important. Without it, we couldn't breathe. It is the closest thing to you. So you are, if you neglect it, you are leaving a whole portion of the face totally flat. So I told somebody I'd record this for just the audio because they're missing, so I'll just don't do it now. So don't neglect the nose. It is vitally important. There is a lot going on, and again, I say often that whatever's closest to you usually will be more crisp and focused, and as things recede back, there's softer edges, less sharpness, less color intensity. So the nose is important. There's a lot of stuff going on with the nose. I'm going to show you a little video clip, 6 minutes from Proco. He gets into a lot of anatomy and a lot about the planes of the nose and really breaks it down into a lot of little pieces. But what I want to say to you first of all is just the simplest structure of the nose is what I want you to walk away from with this today. The bridge, the two side planes, which are like a roof, and then the underplane. And you can break it down even further, but those four parts are, and then the glabella right here is an extension of the nose, so I might say 5, are important. Those, learning to see those first and pay attention to those. A lot of times what people will do is they forget that there's a plane change right here, that the plane begins to face the floor right here, and then this plane faces the sky. So if you just make that flat right there, you just have this flat wall, and it will never look right. No matter who you'll measure, something doesn't look right, something doesn't look right. And it's usually because we flatten this out right here. And if your nose protrudes at all from the face, there's going to be a plane change. And it will. I mean, nobody's nose is going to be on the same plane as your forehead. So that's the main thing I want you to see today as we go through. This is a book by Robert Brockman, who was Daniel Green's teacher. We are in his line of lineage as far as master teachers go. He was an instructor on anatomy at the Art Students League in New York. And it's a wonderful book. It has lots of illustrations. But he's the one, as I was looking at this book, that really first introduced putting a box over a subject to get yourself mindful of the 3D shapes that we're looking at all the time. Even if you're doing a landscape, you're looking at a top, a front, a side, hopefully. And we're training ourselves more and more to position yourself so that you can see 3 sides of any object that you're painting. In a profile, and we'll see some examples in a minute, you're only seeing the side of this nose and maybe a tiny bit of the top. So that's why you see more portraits done in the 3/4 view, so that you can see top, side, and a little of the front, which makes more sense. So the more we educate ourselves about choosing a subject, the easier our paintings are going to be, and the more effective they're going to be, because they're going to have a dimensional quality to them and not just look like a cartoon caricature. So you can see these blocking in these planes. Sometimes when I'm having a difficult time, I'll go myself, and as I come around to your paintings, I'll draw a box over the shape, just to show you where the front, the side, and the top, or the front, the side, and the underside. If a person's head's thrown back like this, you're going to see the underside. It applies to everything, landscapes as well, but you're not going to see up under a tree unless somebody's laying on the ground taking a picture. So it's usually from the top down. Here's more of Da Vinci's crazy drawings. I don't know if there were really people in Da Vinci's books that look like this or not, but maybe there were. But he's illustrating here the plane change of the glabella there. the upward plane and the downward plane. It's really sharp. It's a sharp V right there. So I want you to see that and really get it in your mind. This again, when I go around and look at portraits, this is an area that everybody forgets. And they make that all the same value from here to here. They're pretty good about putting a shadow under here, but that's not flat. So just try to remember that. Here's again, these are,
They all must be the same family, Linda, because they are the same nose.
I know.
It's the devil family.
We get sidetracked with this. I first saw the circles in this book, and I have the book here, I need to pull it out. But I really didn't see anyone drawing this way, and I started noticing those circles with the ball of the nose. Now some people, like I have a more angular tip of my nose, and I have like a little, Sydney and I have a little bit of a split, and I have really long, thin nostrils. So my nostrils are not round. So we have a preconceived idea of the way noses are to start with, but almost always, even on a squared off nose, I start with a ball on the end. And when I come around to help students, they usually make the ball too small. So try to make it as full as you can, because that creates that little piece of cartilage on the tip of the nose. And we'll see in just a second that the bone stops right here. It is really interesting when you look at that. The more you know, the better you're able to describe it with a pencil or with paint. This is out of a book called Painting Vibrant Children's Portraits. And children are a little different because everything about a baby or a child up until about 12 years old is round. Round, round, round. Everything is round. And you hear me say that all the time, but it's true. So the little nose, you can see that the first few marks they've made are just these little marks here on the side plane of the bridge. And then this little S shape under the nose. And that's the very simplified version. But then the circles of the little nostril. And then you can see how the little wings wrap around the bottom. And oftentimes we forget to put those little wings down there. We just put the two nose holes. Boom, we're done. We forget that usually these are called the wings. They wrap around the bottom. But you don't always see them. If a person's head is down a little, the wings kind of disappear. Yeah. So, but this is the primary way, and you can see how after you have that round circle, hey girl, on the tip, you shade around that circle as if it were a ball, and it makes a beautiful tip of the nose. But if you don't put the circles in, you're not mindful of that little tip. So that's my second most important thing, is to look for those circles. Another book describes the bridge like a necktie. I've heard, for an adult nose, I've heard people describe this necktie shape. So I'm really mindful of that as I first put the necktie in, that it's not just a straight shot like a necktie is. There's a lot of angles as you go down. But the top makes the top portion of the necktie, and then the bottom comes around. So these are things you can look for. You can see that this middle section where they've begun the necktie shape doesn't have the glabella in it. And you see how flat it is. It just looks like a wall. So when you add this plane change right here, a little bit darker, suddenly it becomes a dimensional shape. You can see all noses are different. Some of them go out, some of them go in, but they all have a lot. Even if you have a little tiny nose, there's going to be plane changes as you travel down this bridge. It's going to go up, which will catch light, then it's going to go down, which won't have as much light, then back up. So you see this is more of a convex nose, this is more of a concave nose, this is more like a stair-step nose. You can see that there's a lot going on. Everybody's nose is different. So train yourself to look for those value changes along the bridge of the nose. They're really important. This is a handout from the Portrait Society conference in 2000 that I got from Judith Carducci. She's a wonderful portrait painter. And she just hand wrote all these little tips about growing, and it can become like Carl Malden's nose. Do y'all remember? You young ones don't know who Carl Malden is. Big tater nose.
It was.
And we just pray that us little feminine girls don't get those big tater noses. But that does happen. They say ears can continue, the cartilage can continue to grow and get thicker. So be mindful of that. The bottom of the nose might be visualized as a triangle when you're looking at it from the bottom because it goes up. But don't forget this bottom plane. Let's see. She says the middle partition of the nose is lower than the side partition. So right here oftentimes comes down below the wings. So just watch. And again, heads are always in different positions, so it varies. You just have to use your powers of observation. Don't make, the main thing I remember her saying in this conference was don't make the nostrils too dark, because photos always distort the darks. They will make nose holes look black, and if you make a black bluish nose hole, it will look like they're asphyxiated, like they don't have enough oxygen. It will look deathly. You've seen portraits where people have not been good at color, and the flesh tones even look kind of like they should be in the casket. You know, that it's because they've got too much blue. We use blue, but we're just real careful with that mixture between the blue and the warm color, or the green and the warm color. So those are some cautions about the nose. This is in the worksheet, and I didn't send y'all the eyes last week, but I'll send both of them to you this week. Here's the main mistakes: running the highlight down the whole length of the nose, lacking definition here at the glabella, forgetting that, making the holes too black, making shadows too dark, to where you see a real dark shadow in your photo, and if you paint it too dark, it will look like a hole in the face. So that's another caution. Let's see, and it goes into more depth in the worksheet, so I'll send that to you. But the beginner may make the mistake of paying insufficient attention to noses in favor of the eyes and mouth, which is what I said earlier. There's foreshortening that happens with the nose too, because it's sticking straight out in front of you. So you're having to make this whole section stick out that much. And so you've got to do that with the way you draw it. The shapes are not the same as if you painted it from profile. And there are more, so I'll send that to you so that you have it. Also, train yourself to really look for all the plane changes on the nose. This was a guy on Facebook, Juan Ramirez is his name, and he studies Sargent paintings and posts lots of instructional commentaries about what he's found out about Sargent's paintings. On this particular one, he really wanted us to look at all the angle changes down and around the nose, instead of just going bloop with one line down that bridge of the nose. Train yourself to see the way, because the way the light's hitting it will show you all the curves and things in the bone structure that come, and the cartilage that come down the tip of the nose. So take your time. You also notice her nostrils here are very warm, very warm. Inside our mouth, inside our nose, it's always warm. It's red in there. So if you put too much blue again, I can't tell you how much that affects your portraits. You don't put, there may be a little green in there or a tiny bit of blue if it's real orangey, but when you get too much, it totally throws it off. So be really careful about that. Look how much warmth is in her ears as well. So that whole mid-section of the face is where you're going to look for opportunities to put really warm, glowy colors in, really strong colors. Here again is another illustration. He's counted 7 lines plus G2 line. Oh, he's noted that. He's looking for all the brush strokes that Sargent used and all the angle changes. Again, he's not oversimplifying by just one big stroke down the nose. There's a time when you're doing a quick rendering of something that you can do that and just be real simplified, but when you get into the real detail of the painting, you'll see how important that is. Here's one of his illustrations of a painting, and he shows you this is how many people begin a head in painting. They don't draw it like I do. I draw it all out first and make sure that I have a nice strong structure to lay my paint on. This is totally fine to do it this way. It's just coming in the back door. I feel like when you're first learning though, if you don't know how to draw and you're getting a bunch of wet paint on the canvas, that you're going to get really lost with this. And that happened to me in a couple of workshops that I went to early on. This is how Shane Neal paints and carves out a head, and Kinsler. And they start with a whole bunch of wet paint. They don't have pre-mixed piles, so they know where they're going. And so I'm just taking one brush and I'm mixing, and I ended up with a big mushy, muddy mess on the canvas. Even though I knew how to draw, that technique was challenging for me. And so I like to have my students do a drawing first. Somebody posted this week about a drawing and said, I love, it was Casey Boyce, I love the way that this painting style, because if I had put a beautiful drawing on there, I'd be scared to death to paint over my drawing. And I understand that, and I see that when I go around and help you guys. Everybody's real careful they don't cover the line up.
That's right, because I can't get it back.
I know, I don't want to lose my drawing. But listen, and you can come this way if you want to do it. You can start and draw and paint from this perspective. He just carves out the eye sockets. He makes a place for the nose and then goes back in there and reshapes the nose with you see the glabella? See, that's a perfect illustration right here of the glabella. You guys all learned a new word. I'm going to test you on it next week. Glabella. Glabella. So you see the shadow, and there's 2 or 3 shadows. There's a real warm yellow tone. I've got to get my stick so I can point to what I'm talking about. There's a cooler tone right across the center. There's a fleshy tone under that, and then there's the highlight. So there's 4 different things going on right in that one little area of the glabella. And this is a loosely painted portrait. This is not a real detail. This is how a sergeant's method. Here's another nose. And look at the strong shadow there on the glabella and the strong angles. Now this is a man. You can get away. You wouldn't want to make a woman's nose quite this angular. For the most part. I have a pretty angular nose though, so mine would be, fairly angular. But look at the warmth around the nostril, the wing of the nostril, and look at the warmth on the lower part under the, now the nose holes are really black here. So, I don't know, we're looking at a photograph. Yeah, it looks like
his eyebrows and his hair.
It does, and he's really dark, so his mustache is, it's not a cool tone, but the mustache is also adding to the darkness of that nostril. But so there's exceptions to every rule, but there's no rules. I always say that too. But just be mindful of these things as you're painting, because if things are too black and dark, look how warm her nostrils are. And you can see the angle change. Look at all the angles going down the bridge of her nose. It's zigzaggy. And then her nostrils are almost on an angle this way, like wings.
Very much so.
Yeah, very warm. They're much warmer on the right side where the light source is coming, because the nostrils are thin, like our ears. They're thin skin. When the light goes in, it's a little bit like the marble and the grape I showed you last week. The light enters and then it spreads out inside of there and kind of dances around in there. It's glowy in there. So think about what you're painting when you're painting. An area that's thin is going to capture light and hold it in there and make it real warm and beautiful. Your paintings will improve instantly if you begin to do this. This is a Velasquez painting. Remember too, on these old master paintings, look how cracked and everything. That paint and varnish darken over time. Colors darken. And so it may not have originally been this dark. But you definitely see the ball on the tip. And the little ball it's a foreshortened portrait. We're seeing more of this side of his face than we are the right side. So that nostril is really small. So be really careful. You're not going to make a full nose on a person that's turned. It's going to look funny if you do. Another sergeant painting. This is really quickly painted. And you can see, look how pointed that part of her nose is. It's kind of odd looking. It's almost like he forgot to.
I think some people did lower.
To shade that lower portion. But hey, it's a sergeant painting, so who are we to?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, this is like Madam X. This is one of the most famous portraits by Sargent. It's a full length. We got to see it in New York, in Boston. There's hardly any plane change across there. But you see how warm the nostril is. And it's also a difficult pose when you go to open studio and you're the last one there. Don't be late to a workshop where you have a model, because you end up sitting on the floor drawing up somebody's nose, or a profile shot, because you don't have anything to tell your story with. It's just the side of the nose, and it's really, really difficult.
Look at that eyebrow.
That's what I told y'all not to do last week, is to just do an arch. So but look at the lashes. They're just a soft blur. And this was his most controversial painting. The strap was down when it went to the salon in Italy. Where's the salon? Paris. When it went to the salon, he had to paint the strap back up on her shoulder. It was so scandalous. It was people were jealous, is what they were. And she was so white and fair, and it was just a kind of a shocking painting to them back then. But you see, there's not much value range here. It looks really flat.
It looks so flat.
It looks so flat from here, and I should have the big painting here for you to see too. When you look at this, it's more about her striking appearance, her velvet dress with those rhinestone straps. It's more about the whole painting. It's not a zoom in of her face and her nose, so that also plays a big part. Here's one more example of a beautifully painted nose, and you can definitely see the glabella there and the angle change. The top of the nose, the underside, and the side of the nose are obvious there. You see how the side bridge is more yellow and the top bridge is warm. So there's a temperature change. They're both warm, but there's a temperature change that if we grayscale this and this may be exactly the same value, but they're temperature difference. And that helps a little bit, a temperature change. So we're learning, and you'll learn more and more about that the longer you paint. And how sometimes Daniel Green used to say, he would talk about going through here and he'd say, if I put a little cool tone right here, it will turn the edge. I didn't know what the heck he was talking about. Turning an edge. It was a different vocabulary to me. But now I understand that when I want something to start going back, and I'll come around and I'll show you, I'll put really hot, warm color here. I'll mix a little blue with the next stripe, and I'll mix even more blue back here, and then I fuzz them out. And sure enough, that makes that cheek turn back and push back on the painting. It may all be the same value across there, but the coolness helps it look like it recedes back. And with your landscapes, I keep pointing to you, Teresa, but others are working on landscapes in here too. The same thing. As things go back in the distance, they'll be foggier, blue or purple, and it makes them look like they go back.
The other was, the cheeks were pink and warm, and do you want to do it with that same, or do you make two? Because you kind of did that on my...
Yes, I like the Daniel Green palette down here has a